At 0740 on February 15, 1944, Lieutenant Junior Grade Nathan Gordon sat in the cockpit of his PBY-5A Catalina over the Bismarck Sea, watching columns of black smoke rise from Kavieng Harbor 15 miles to the north. 27 years old, 18 months in the Pacific, already decorated with the Distinguished Flying Cross. The Japanese anti-aircraft batteries at Kavieng had just opened fire on the 5th Air Force bombing raid, and American planes were falling from the sky. Gordon commanded a 9-man crew aboard a flying boat he had named Arkansas Traveler. They were part of Patrol Squadron 34, the Black Cats, based at Samurai Island in Milne Bay, Papua New Guinea. Their mission that morning was simple: wait near Vitu Islands, 200 miles southwest of the harbor. Monitor the radio. If any bombers went down, go get the crews. The 5th Air Force had sent everything they had against Kavieng. 4 squadrons of A-20 Havocs from the 3rd Bombardment Group attacked shipping in the harbor. 7 squadrons of B-25 Mitchells from the 38th and 345th Groups bombed facilities along the harbor front. Low-level strafers hitting Japanese positions at near suicidal altitudes, some as low as 50 feet. The Japanese were ready. Kavieng Harbor sat on the northern tip of New Ireland, one of the most heavily defended positions in the Bismarck archipelago. Anti-aircraft batteries ringed the harbor. Gun emplacements dotted every stretch of shoreline. Overlapping fields of fire covered every approach from the sea and air. The Japanese had been building and reinforcing these defenses for more than 2 years. 8 American aircraft fell to their guns that morning, 8 crews, dozens of airmen. Rescue operations in the Pacific were brutal mathematics. A pilot who ditched his plane in the open ocean had a chance. Search planes could find him. Flying boats could land in calm seas and pull him out. The Pacific was vast, but it was survivable if rescue came quickly. A pilot who went down near an enemy-held shore faced a different equation entirely. The Japanese did not take prisoners. Not out here. Not anymore. American airmen who survived a crash near Japanese positions faced 2 options: drown in the water waiting for rescue that would never come, or wash ashore and face the enemy. PBY Catalinas were the only aircraft capable of water landings in combat zones. They could set down on the ocean, taxi to survivors, and take off again. In theory. In practice, the Catalina was a 65-foot flying boat with a wingspan of 104 feet and a maximum speed of 179 miles per hour. Against Japanese fighters, it was helpless. Against shore-based anti-aircraft guns, it was a slow-moving target the size of a small building. Dumbo missions, the Navy called them. Search and rescue flights into hostile waters. The crews who flew them understood the odds. If they landed too close to enemy positions, the Japanese would shoot them apart before they could rescue anyone. If they landed too far away, the survivors would drown before they could reach them. Gordon had flown dozens of Dumbo missions across the Southwest Pacific. He knew the protocols. Stay outside enemy gun range. Let the fighters suppress defensive fire. Wait for the right moment. Calculate the risk. But the right moment rarely came when men were dying in the water. At 08:15, Gordon's radioman received the first distress call. An A-20 Havoc from the 3rd Bombardment Group had been hit by anti-aircraft fire over Kavieng Harbor. The aircraft was going down. The crew had seconds to bail out before impact. Gordon turned Arkansas Traveler toward the smoke. 4 P-47 Thunderbolts from the 348th Fighter Group had been assigned to escort Gordon's Catalina. They were his only protection. 4 fighters against an entire Japanese defensive network built over 2 years. The math was not good. If you want to see how Gordon's rescue attempt turned out, please hit that like button. It helps us share these forgotten stories of courage. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Gordon. The sea conditions that morning were among the worst Gordon had ever seen for a water landing. Waves breaking 16 to 18 feet high, heavy swells rolling across the harbor approaches, almost no wind, which meant almost no lift for takeoff. A normal pilot would have aborted. Regulations required minimum sea states for Catalina landings. 18-foot swells exceeded every safety parameter in the manual. The risk of structural damage on landing was extreme. The risk of capsizing was real. But somewhere in that water, American airmen were drowning. Gordon pushed the throttles forward. Arkansas Traveler began her descent toward Kavieng Harbor. Below, the Japanese gun crews tracked the 65-foot flying boat dropping out of the sky toward their killing zone. They had never seen anything like this before. No pilot had ever been stupid enough to try. Landing a PBY Catalina on calm water required skill. Landing one in 18-foot swells required something closer to controlled insanity. The Catalina was never designed for rough water operations. Its hull was built for gentle landings on protected harbors and calm Pacific lagoons. The aircraft's belly sat low in the water, and its twin engines mounted on a high wing kept the propellers clear of spray. But in heavy seas, the forces on that hull could tear the aircraft apart. Gordon knew the numbers. A PBY-5A weighed over 17,000 pounds empty. Add fuel, crew, ammunition, and rescue equipment, and the aircraft approached 27,000 pounds. Dropping that weight onto 18-foot waves at landing speed meant impacts that could buckle hull plates, shear rivets, and open seams to the sea. The first landing was the worst. Gordon brought Arkansas Traveler down toward the coordinates where the A-20 Havoc had gone in. His crew scanned the water for survivors, life rafts, debris. The P-47 escorts circled overhead, watching for Japanese aircraft and marking the position of enemy gun emplacements along the shore. The Japanese gunners tracked the descending Catalina, but held their fire. The flying boat was still outside effective range. They waited. Gordon lined up his approach into the swells. A water landing required flying the aircraft just above stall speed, then settling onto the surface with minimal vertical velocity. In calm conditions, this was straightforward. In 18-foot seas, it meant timing the touchdown to hit between wave crests, not on top of them. He got it wrong. Arkansas Traveler struck a wave crest at nearly 80 miles per hour. The impact slammed through the airframe. Gordon heard metal screaming as the hull flexed beyond its design limits. Warning lights flickered across his instrument panel. The aircraft bounced, hit again, and finally settled into the churning water. They were down. They were not sinking. But the damage was severe. Water began pouring through burst seams along the hull. The bilge pumps kicked in automatically, fighting to keep pace with the flooding. Gordon's flight engineer reported multiple leaks throughout the lower fuselage. The aircraft was taking on water faster than they could pump it out, and they had not found the A-20 crew. Gordon taxied Arkansas Traveler through the heavy swells, his crew searching desperately for survivors. Minutes passed. The Japanese guns remained silent, but Gordon knew they were watching, waiting for him to drift closer. Every second on the water increased the risk. The A-20 crew was gone, either killed on impact, drowned before they could escape, or already sunk beneath the waves. There was no one to rescue. Gordon faced a decision. His aircraft was damaged and taking on water. His crew was exposed. The mission had failed before it began. Standard procedure dictated immediate takeoff and return to base for repairs. Then the second call came through. A B-25 Mitchell from the 38th Bombardment Group had been hit by anti-aircraft fire. The aircraft was down in the water. 5 crewmen were alive in the wreckage. The new coordinates placed the B-25 closer to the Japanese shore batteries, within range of their guns. Any rescue attempt would be under direct enemy fire. Gordon had a damaged aircraft, a crew of 9, and 5 airmen dying in the water less than a mile from Japanese guns. He turned Arkansas Traveler toward the new coordinates. The takeoff from that first landing nearly killed them. The Catalina needed wind to generate lift, and there was almost none that morning. Gordon pushed the throttles to full power and fought the aircraft up onto the step, the hydrodynamic position where the hull planed across the water surface. The swells battered them. Spray blinded the cockpit. The engines screamed at maximum power. For nearly a minute, Arkansas Traveler refused to fly. The overloaded, damaged flying boat clawed at the water, fighting for every knot of airspeed. Gordon held the controls steady, waiting for the moment when physics would either release them or destroy them. The Catalina broke free. They climbed away from the first landing site, water still streaming from the damaged hull. Below, the Japanese gunners finally opened fire. Tracers arced up toward the climbing flying boat. Gordon ignored them. He had 5 men to save, and his aircraft was already falling apart. The second landing brought Gordon directly into the Japanese kill zone. The B-25 Mitchell had gone down approximately 1 mile from the enemy shoreline, close enough for the Japanese gunners to see the survivors in the water, close enough for accurate anti-aircraft fire, close enough that any rescue aircraft would be flying straight into overlapping fields of fire from multiple gun emplacements. Gordon descended toward the crash site anyway. His P-47 escorts dove ahead of him, strafing the visible gun positions along the shore. The Thunderbolts carried 8 50-caliber machine guns each, and their pilots worked methodically along the coastline, suppressing everything that looked like a defensive position. But there were too many guns and not enough fighters. The Japanese fire slackened, but never stopped. Arkansas Traveler came down through a curtain of tracers. Gordon could see the B-25 wreckage now. The bomber had broken apart on impact, scattering debris across several hundred yards of ocean. 5 men clung to pieces of wreckage and a partially inflated life raft. They had been in the water for nearly 20 minutes. Some appeared injured. The second water landing was marginally better than the first. Gordon timed his approach more carefully, dropping the Catalina between swells rather than onto them. The impact was still brutal, but the hull held. More seams opened, more water poured in, but the aircraft remained flyable. Gordon taxied toward the survivors. This was the most dangerous moment of any water rescue. The Catalina had to stop moving to pull men from the water. That meant cutting the engines to prevent the propellers from killing the survivors they were trying to save. A stationary aircraft on the water, engines off, was completely defenseless. Gordon shut down both engines. Arkansas Traveler drifted in the swells, a 65-foot target sitting motionless within range of Japanese guns. The shore batteries opened fire immediately. Waterspouts erupted around the aircraft as shells bracketed their position. The Japanese gunners were adjusting their aim, walking their fire closer with each salvo. Gordon's crew worked with desperate efficiency. The waist gunners abandoned their positions and moved to the observation blisters, reaching down to grab survivors from the water. The flight engineer coordinated the recovery while monitoring the flooding in the hull. Every man had a job. Every second counted. The first survivor came aboard bleeding from shrapnel wounds. The second was barely conscious, hauled up by his flight suit. 3 more followed in rapid succession. 5 men from the B-25, all alive, all now crammed into the already crowded fuselage of a damaged flying boat. 14 men aboard, 1 pilot, 8 crew, 5 survivors. Gordon restarted the engines. The Japanese gunners had found their range. Shells were landing within 50 yards of the aircraft now. The next salvo would be closer. Gordon had seconds to get airborne or die on the water with everyone he had just rescued. The takeoff run began in chaos. Arkansas Traveler was heavier now, lower in the water, sluggish on the controls. The damaged hull created additional drag. The swells seemed higher than before, the wind even more absent. Gordon pushed the throttles to their stops and prayed. The Catalina fought the water for nearly 90 seconds, the longest takeoff of Gordon's career. Shells continued falling around them. His crew braced for impact. The survivors, wounded and exhausted, could only watch as their rescuers struggled to save them all. Arkansas Traveler finally lifted off, staggering into the air with water streaming from her hull and 14 souls aboard. They had done it. Against every regulation, against every reasonable calculation of risk, they had pulled 5 men from the water under direct enemy fire. Gordon turned the aircraft toward home base, 200 miles to the southwest. Then the radio crackled again. Another B-25 was down, another crew in the water. This time, the coordinates placed them even closer to the Japanese defenses than before, and 2 of Gordon's 4 P-47 escorts were now critically low on fuel. They had to return to base immediately. Gordon looked at his damaged aircraft, his exhausted crew, his wounded passengers. He had every reason to continue home. No one would blame him. He had already done more than anyone could ask. He turned Arkansas Traveler back toward Kavieng Harbor. The third landing pushed Arkansas Traveler beyond any reasonable limit of survival. Gordon now had only 2 P-47 escorts. The other 2 Thunderbolts had turned back toward Finschhafen, their fuel tanks nearly empty. Half his fighter protection was gone. The Japanese gunners along the Kavieng shoreline had watched 2 successful rescue attempts. They knew exactly what the slow-moving flying boat was doing. They were ready. The second downed B-25 had crashed approximately 1 mile from the enemy shore. 4 crewmen had made it into a rubber life raft. They were drifting slowly toward Japanese-held territory with every passing minute. Gordon brought his battered Catalina down for the third time that morning. The two remaining P-47s made strafing runs along the coastline, but their ammunition was running low. The suppressive fire was less intense now, less sustained. The Japanese gunners had learned to wait out the strafing passes and resume firing the moment the fighters pulled away. Arkansas Traveler descended into a wall of anti-aircraft fire. The hull was in desperate condition. Multiple seams had opened during the first two landings. The bilge pumps ran continuously, barely keeping pace with the flooding. Salt water sloshed in the lower fuselage, adding weight and reducing the aircraft's already marginal performance. Gordon's flight engineer estimated they were carrying several hundred pounds of water that had no business being inside an airplane. The third landing was violent. Gordon hit a swell wrong, and the impact sent shudders through the entire airframe. Something in the hull gave way. The flooding increased. But the aircraft stayed intact, and Gordon taxied toward the life raft as fast as the damaged Catalina could move. The Japanese guns had their range now. Shells began falling within yards of the aircraft. The gunners on shore could see the flying boat clearly. They could see the men in the water. They understood exactly what was happening, and they were determined to stop it. Gordon shut down his engines for the third time. His crew pulled the 4 B-25 survivors aboard in less than 2 minutes, faster than before. They had developed a system now, a brutal efficiency born of desperation. Grab the man, haul him up, move to the next one. No wasted motion, no hesitation. 18 men now occupied an aircraft designed to carry a crew of 9 on combat missions. The third takeoff was the closest call yet. Arkansas Traveler was dangerously overloaded. The hull sat lower in the water than Gordon had ever seen. The damaged seams leaked constantly. The engines strained against the additional weight. The swells seemed to grab at the aircraft, refusing to let go. Gordon held the throttles at maximum power for over 2 minutes. The aircraft would not lift. The hull pounded against wave after wave, each impact adding to the structural damage. Water sprayed across the cockpit, blinding Gordon to everything except his instruments. The Japanese shells walked closer. 100 yards, 75 yards, 50 yards. The gunners were bracketing the aircraft with methodical precision. The next salvo would be a direct hit. Arkansas Traveler broke free at the last possible moment. The aircraft staggered into the air, engines screaming, hull streaming water, 18 men crammed into every available space. Gordon climbed away from the shore as anti-aircraft fire exploded around them. They had done it again. 3 landings, 9 survivors rescued. An aircraft that should have been grounded after the first landing was somehow still flying. Gordon turned toward home, 200 miles to Samurai. His aircraft was falling apart. His crew was exhausted. The men he had rescued needed medical attention. Every minute in the air increased the risk of structural failure. The radio operator received the final transmission. A third B-25 Mitchell had been shot down over Kavieng Harbor. 6 crewmen were alive in the water. Their life raft was visible from the air. The coordinates placed them 600 yards from the Japanese shore. 600 yards. Close enough to see individual enemy soldiers on the beach. Close enough for rifle fire, not just artillery. Close enough that the Japanese could practically swim out and capture the survivors themselves. And Gordon's last 2 P-47 escorts had just announced they were returning to base. Fuel critical. No choice. Arkansas Traveler would be completely alone. 600 yards from the Japanese shore. No fighter escort. A damaged aircraft overloaded with 18 men. Gordon had every justification to refuse this mission. His aircraft was compromised. His crew had already performed beyond any reasonable expectation. The 9 survivors aboard needed immediate medical attention. Regulations, common sense, and basic self-preservation all demanded he turn toward home. Gordon calculated the odds in his head. The 4th rescue site was directly beneath the heaviest concentration of Japanese defenses at Kavieng. Gun emplacements lined that stretch of coastline. Artillery positions overlooked the water. At 600 yards, the Japanese would not need anti-aircraft guns. They could hit the Catalina with field artillery, heavy machine guns, even rifle fire if they chose. No American aircraft had ever attempted a water landing that close to an occupied enemy shore. There was a reason for that. The 6 men in the water had survived the crash of their B-25 Mitchell. They had made it into life rafts. They were alive, visible from the air, drifting slowly toward Japanese-held beaches. Within an hour, maybe less, they would wash ashore. The Japanese would be waiting. Gordon thought about what happened to American airmen captured in this part of the Pacific. Intelligence reports were clear: interrogation, torture, execution. The Japanese did not maintain prisoner of war camps in the forward combat zones. Captured airmen simply disappeared. 6 men, 6 lives, 6 families back in America who would never know what happened to their sons, husbands, brothers. Gordon made his decision. He turned Arkansas Traveler back toward Kavieng Harbor for the 4th time. The 2 P-47 escorts were gone now, their engines drinking the last of their fuel reserves on the long flight back to Finschhafen. Gordon watched them disappear to the south. His only protection was gone. Whatever happened next, he would face it alone. But he was not entirely without help. Several B-25 Mitchells from the morning raid had expended their bombs but still carried ammunition for their machine guns. When word spread that a Catalina was attempting a 4th rescue under the heaviest Japanese defenses, the bomber pilots made a decision of their own. They turned back toward Kavieng. The B-25s could not land on water. They could not pull survivors from the sea. But they could do something else. They could strafe. They could make the Japanese gunners keep their heads down for a few critical minutes. They could give Gordon a chance. Arkansas Traveler descended toward the coordinates as the B-25 swept in ahead of her. The Japanese defenses at this position were formidable. Multiple gun emplacements covered every approach from the sea. Artillery pieces capable of destroying the Catalina with a single hit. Machine gun nests that could shred the flying boat's thin aluminum skin. Hundreds of enemy soldiers watching from the shore, close enough to see the faces of the men they were trying to kill. The B-25s made their runs at low altitude, pouring machine gun fire into every visible position along the coastline. Tracers streaked toward the shore. The Japanese guns returned fire, filling the air with anti-aircraft bursts. The bombers weaved and jinked, drawing attention away from the slow-moving Catalina behind them. Gordon used every second they bought him. He brought Arkansas Traveler down in a steep descent, trading altitude for speed, trying to minimize the time he spent in the Japanese kill zone. The aircraft was heavier than it had ever been, more damaged than it should have been, lower on fuel than he wanted to think about. The controls felt sluggish, unresponsive, like flying a building rather than an airplane. The water rushed up to meet him. At 600 yards from the Japanese shore, Gordon could see individual soldiers moving in the tree line. He could see the muzzle flashes of guns firing directly at his aircraft. He could see the life rafts below him, 6 American airmen watching the impossible happen above their heads. A PBY Catalina, alone, descending into the heaviest defenses the Japanese could offer. Gordon committed to the landing. There was no turning back now. Either he would pull those men from the water, or he would die trying. 18 men aboard, 6 men in the water, 24 lives depending on what happened in the next few minutes. The hull touched the waves. The 4th landing was unlike anything Gordon had experienced before. At 600 yards from the Japanese shore, the enemy gunners did not need to estimate range or adjust their aim. They could see Arkansas Traveler as clearly as a ship in a harbor. They opened fire the moment the hull touched water. Bullets punched through the Catalina's aluminum skin. The thin fuselage offered no protection against heavy machine gun rounds. Gordon heard the impacts throughout the aircraft, a deadly drumbeat of metal striking metal. His crew ducked instinctively, pressing themselves against any available cover. There was no cover. They were inside an aluminum tube floating 600 yards from enemy guns. Gordon kept the aircraft moving. He could not afford to stop, could not afford to present a stationary target. He taxied toward the life rafts at maximum speed, waves crashing over the bow, spray mixing with the tracers cutting through the air around them. The B-25s made another strafing pass along the shoreline. The Japanese fire slackened momentarily as the gunners turned their attention to the more immediate threat. Gordon used every second of that distraction. The first life raft held 4 men. 2 appeared injured, unable to help themselves into the aircraft. Gordon's crew worked with brutal efficiency, hauling bodies through the observation blisters while bullets continued to strike the fuselage. One of the waist gunners took a position at his weapon and returned fire toward the shore, more to force the Japanese to take cover than with any real hope of hitting anything. The second raft held 2 more survivors. One was unconscious. The other was bleeding badly from wounds sustained in the crash. Gordon's crew pulled them aboard anyway, adding their weight to an aircraft already far beyond its design limits. 24 men now occupied a PBY Catalina rated for a combat crew of 9. Gordon did not wait for his crew to secure the survivors. He could not. Every second on the water increased the odds of a catastrophic hit. A single artillery round through the hull would kill everyone aboard. A lucky burst into the engines would strand them under enemy guns until the Japanese finished them off. He pushed the throttles forward while men were still being pulled through the hatches. Arkansas Traveler began her takeoff run 600 yards from the Japanese shore. The aircraft was so overloaded that the hull barely rose onto the step. The damaged seams poured water into the fuselage. The engines, running at maximum power for hours now, screamed in protest. The propellers clawed at the humid Pacific air, fighting for every ounce of thrust. The aircraft would not fly. Gordon held the throttles at their stops. Full power, maximum RPM, everything the engines could give. The Catalina wallowed through the swells, accelerating with agonizing slowness. The airspeed indicator crept upward. 60 knots, 65, 70. The minimum takeoff speed for a PBY-5A was approximately 75 knots. With 24 men aboard and hundreds of pounds of seawater in the hull, Gordon estimated he needed at least 85. He did not have the distance. The Japanese gunners understood what was happening. They saw the flying boat struggling to lift off, saw it trapped on the water, saw their opportunity. Artillery and machine gun fire concentrated on the fleeing aircraft. Waterspouts erupted around the Catalina. Shell fragments peppered the wings and fuselage. Gordon held course. He could not turn, could not maneuver, could not do anything except hold the aircraft straight and pray for a miracle. At 82 knots, Arkansas Traveler broke free of the water. The aircraft did not so much take off as claw its way into the air through sheer force of will. The climb rate was nearly 0. The engines were overheating. The hull was taking on water from a dozen new holes. But they were airborne. They were flying. They were alive. Gordon turned south, away from Kavieng Harbor, away from the Japanese guns, away from the most dangerous morning of his life. Behind him, 6 men who should have died in enemy hands lay bleeding on the deck of his shattered aircraft. 15 survivors total, 9 original crew, 24 souls depending on a flying boat that had no business still being in the air. 200 miles to Samurai, 200 miles to safety, if Arkansas Traveler held together that long. The flight back to Samurai tested Arkansas Traveler beyond any specification her designers had ever imagined. 200 miles of open ocean, 24 men crammed into an aircraft designed for 9. A hull riddled with bullet holes and leaking from dozens of burst seams. Engines that had been running at maximum power for hours. Fuel reserves that Gordon could only estimate because the gauges had stopped working reliably somewhere over Kavieng Harbor. Gordon climbed to cruising altitude and reduced power to conserve fuel. The engines protested the transition, running rough for several terrifying seconds before settling into an uneven rhythm. The aircraft vibrated constantly, a reminder of the structural damage hidden throughout the airframe. The wounded survivors needed immediate medical attention. Gordon's crew did what they could with the limited first aid supplies aboard. Bandages, tourniquets, pressure on bleeding wounds. Several of the rescued airmen were in serious condition. Every minute of flight time reduced their chances of survival. Gordon pushed the damaged Catalina as fast as he dared. The bilge pumps ran continuously throughout the return flight. Water sloshed in the lower fuselage, shifting the aircraft's center of gravity with every movement. Gordon had to constantly adjust the trim to compensate. Flying Arkansas Traveler felt like balancing on a knife edge, one wrong input away from losing control entirely. Samurai Island appeared on the horizon after nearly 2 hours of flight. The seaplane base at Milne Bay had received radio reports of Gordon's rescue attempts. They knew he was coming. They knew his aircraft was damaged. They did not know if he would make it. Gordon brought Arkansas Traveler down for her fifth and final water landing of the day. The approach was textbook. The touchdown was gentle. But the moment the hull settled into the water, the accumulated damage made itself known. Seams that had held together through 4 combat landings finally gave way. Water poured into the aircraft faster than the pumps could handle. Arkansas Traveler began to sink. Ground crews and rescue boats raced toward the stricken Catalina. They reached the aircraft before it went under completely, pulling the 24 occupants to safety one by one. The wounded survivors were transferred to waiting medical personnel. Gordon's crew stumbled onto the dock, exhausted beyond words. Arkansas Traveler settled into the shallow water of Milne Bay, her final mission complete. The aircraft that had made 4 impossible landings under enemy fire would never fly again. Word of Gordon's actions spread through the Pacific Command structure within hours. The reports seemed impossible. 4 landings under direct enemy fire, 15 survivors rescued, a final pickup 600 yards from Japanese guns with no fighter escort? Commanders who read the initial accounts assumed the details had been exaggerated. They had not been exaggerated. Witness statements from the P-47 pilots, the B-25 crews who provided covering fire, and the 15 rescued airmen all confirmed the same incredible story. Lieutenant Junior Grade Nathan Gordon had done exactly what the reports claimed. He had flown into the heaviest Japanese defenses in the Bismarck Sea 4 separate times and brought out every man he could reach. Admiral William Halsey received the full report at his headquarters. The commander of the South Pacific Force had seen countless acts of heroism during the war. He had decorated hundreds of men for bravery under fire. But Gordon's rescue mission stood apart. Halsey sent a personal telegram to Gordon's squadron. The message was brief and direct. The rescue at Kavieng Harbor was one of the most remarkable feats of the war. The recommendation for the Medal of Honor began moving through official channels immediately. Gordon's commanding officers documented every detail of the mission. The 15 rescued airmen provided sworn statements. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. In September 1944, 7 months after the rescue, Lieutenant Nathan Gordon stood at attention at 7th Fleet headquarters in Brisbane, Australia. Vice Admiral Thomas Kincaid pinned the Medal of Honor to his chest. Gordon became the only PBY Catalina pilot in history to receive the nation's highest military decoration. His crew of 8 received the Silver Star, each one recognized for their role in the rescue. But the medals were not the end of Nathan Gordon's story. They were barely the beginning. Nathan Gordon survived the war. Many of the men he rescued did not expect to say the same. The 15 airmen pulled from Kavieng Harbor on February 15, 1944, returned to their units, their families, their lives. Some continued flying combat missions over the Pacific. Others were rotated home after their ordeal. All of them owed their existence to a 27-year-old pilot from Arkansas who refused to abandon them. Gordon continued flying Dumbo missions until the end of the war. He added 2 more Distinguished Flying Crosses to his decorations, along with 6 air medals. By the time he was honorably discharged in October 1945, he had become one of the most decorated rescue pilots in Navy history. He returned to Morrilton, Arkansas, the small town where he had been born. He reopened his law practice with his brother Edward. He married Virginia in 1948. He tried to resume the quiet life he had left behind when he enlisted in May 1941. But Nathan Gordon was not destined for a quiet life. In 1946, the people of Arkansas elected him lieutenant governor. He won re-election 9 more times, serving under 4 different governors for 20 consecutive years. His tenure from 1947 to 1967 remains the longest in Arkansas history. The Medal of Honor recipient, who had risked everything to save 15 strangers, became a public servant who dedicated his life to his community. Gordon rarely spoke about Kavieng Harbor. When asked about the rescue, he deflected attention to his crew. 8 men had worked alongside him that day, pulling survivors from the water while bullets tore through their aircraft. 8 men had trusted him to get them home alive. The Silver Stars they received were earned in the same water, under the same guns, facing the same impossible odds. The men Gordon rescued carried their own memories of that day. The terror of floating in enemy waters. the certainty that no rescue would come, the impossible sight of a PBY Catalina descending toward them through anti-aircraft fire, the hands reaching down to pull them from the sea. Some of them found Gordon after the war. They wrote letters, they made phone calls, they traveled to Arkansas to shake the hand of the man who had saved their lives. These reunions meant more to Gordon than any medal or political office. Arkansas Traveler never flew again after that final landing at Samurai. The aircraft was too badly damaged to repair, but the name lived on. Gordon ensured that every PBY he commanded afterward carried the same designation, a tribute to the flying boat that had held together through 4 impossible landings. In 1980, the Arkansas Aviation Historical Society inducted Gordon into the Arkansas Aviation Hall of Fame. He was among the first 5 honorees, recognized not just for his Medal of Honor mission, but for his entire career as a naval aviator. Nathan Gordon died on September 8, 2008, 4 days after his 92nd birthday. He is buried at Elmwood Cemetery in Morrilton, Arkansas, the town he never truly left. His grave marker bears the Medal of Honor insignia and the simple facts of a remarkable life. The PBY Catalina that made the Kavieng rescue no longer exists, but examples of the aircraft survive in museums across the country. The National Air and Space Museum in Washington preserves the memory of Gordon's mission as one of the defining moments of Catalina operations in World War II. The only Medal of Honor ever earned in a flying boat. 15 men lived because one pilot refused to calculate the odds. 4 landings under fire. 600 yards from enemy guns. A damaged aircraft that should have been grounded. A crew that never hesitated. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We are rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about pilots who landed under fire to save men no one else could reach. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You are not just a viewer. You are part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you are here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Nathan Gordon does not disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you are helping make that happen.